Welcome to Quill Sword Blogcast. Will Europe rearm? Yes, kinda, but mostly no. I watched a video from Caspian Reports Monday morning about Europe's ongoing efforts to rearm and to decrease their dependency on American defense. Funniest video he's ever done. I kept cracking up and had to stop the video a few times so I wouldn't miss anything. Unfortunately, it wasn't supposed to be funny. Don't get this wrong. I like Caspian Reports, and he does good work. I definitely recommend it as a good source for a basic overview analysis. But we all have those days. At this point, since I see the same pattern in a lot of younger commentators, I'm assuming that it's the changing tone of politics in the West as a whole that is really throwing him. I have the advantage of having grown up in an uncertain and fairly contentious world. Politics got pretty placid for a time after the fall of the Soviet Union, so it's only natural that as the world regains a more normal footing, it will disorient those who grew up in a calm spot in world history. Europe hasn't been as boisterous as the US like ever, but it used to be a lot more vibrant. Two world wars are bound to take a lot out of anybody. Europe is nowhere near as risk tolerant as the probably overly risk tolerant US, and it can't really deal with internal conflict very well. Most of its systems for that seem to be formal and oppressive. A return to the stormy nature of world politics is going to be hardest for the Europeans. It's also inevitable. Time for the big boy pants, guys. I'm confident Europe can regain its equilibrium and its vibrancy. But that's a very, very long process. Decades of socialism light and pretending that no real people are on the right side of the spectrum have left Europe on shaky ground for relearning this whole getting along and being grown up nation states thing. It's hard, and it takes time. Time is not a commodity Europe has in the defense sphere, however. But it's not that made Caspian's video so hilarious. That has to do with the assumption underlying the entire video that Europe, the EU, and the various European nations can unify quickly enough despite the immense political pain that will accompany trying to rebuild their defense sector and pay for it. Oh, they're talking big now, and Europe will unquestionably start putting money into defense. They're scared, confused, and stuck, so that much will get done. But rebuilding their economies when that will require deregulation? Actually cutting social spending to put money toward defense? Not a chance. The U.S. has been subsidizing European social welfare programs and entitlements since before my little decrepit self was even born. In the ultimate proof of the concept of the fungibility of money, the U.S. has been paying massive amounts for defense that covers Europe. After the fall of the Soviet Union particularly, but even well before that, Europe made a habit of shortchanging its defense sectors, knowing the U.S. would pick up the slack. Want to guess where the most of that money went? The bread and circus idea is too simplistic, but yeah, it's pretty apt too. Amazing how well a political party can stay in power if it gives enough people goodies without angering the rest of them too much. Europe bought itself a very long period of political apathy trying to avoid the discontent and fracturing of the early 20th century. You can't blame them to an extent. Two world wars, both insanely stupid causes, would make anyone sane think twice. They scared themselves stupid. They scared the crap out of the U.S., too. Part of why we agreed to this insanity for so very long was to keep Europe stable. You whippersnappers haven't a clue. World War II was devastating beyond your conception. I'm closer to it in age, but I doubt I fully get it. Very, very little of the damage came to American shores, so while we paid a high price in blood and treasure fighting World War II, we didn't suffer the same kind of damage to the national psyche. Two-thirds of Dresden were laid flat by the British and American bombers. Not in 10 months like what has happened in Gaza, but in 2 nights. By the time the war was over, all of Europe had to be rebuilt in one way or another, which explains why Europe got so very gun shy. What it doesn't do is justify nation states farming out their defense almost entirely to an ally, not even to the U.S. No, this isn't the first time the U.S. has raised defense issues with Europe and has pressured Europe to up its spending. That was a lot easier during the Cold War, but the issue has come up between the U.S. and Europe repeatedly in the last 3.5 decades. The difference is this time the U.S. has a president who isn't taking no for an answer, which wrecks their little safe bubble. Nation states are not supposed to live in safe little bubbles. Long term, Trump may well be the best thing to ever happen to Europe because he's kicked them out of their complacency. But he hasn't yet spurred them into real action. That's what Caspian assumes incorrectly. Europe will make a lot of noise. Kids about to go behind the woodshed usually do. I am not explaining behind the woodshed. Look it up, whippersnappers. European governments will make some investments and cut some ribbons in front of cameras. But when the time comes to actually fund this kind of massive shift, Europe will pretend that nothing happened. They will get a lot better, but only until the bill comes due. Then they will skip, just like they always do. Europe is getting better. The invasion into Ukraine was a major league wake-up call. Europe's biggest problem right now is that its governments think that they are a lot more competent than they really are. They did unify after the invasion a whole lot better than anyone would have predicted. We're kind of proud of them for that. But only the eastern parts really put themselves on the line. Estonia was de-arming itself by sending weapons to Ukraine just after the invasion, before the U.S. had a chance to say anything about being a backstop. That's some kind of gutsy, Estonia. Germany sent humanitarian aid. Eventually, it managed to unknot its bureaucracy enough to send weapons. They did step up to the plate, but Estonia was unquestionably the better batter. We won't mention that Germany tried to stop Estonia at one point. No one's perfect. Point being, if a war on their doorstep won't get Europe off its collective backside, a few tariffs sure as heck won't. They will gripe and bellyache about how unfair the U.S. is being and how unreliable. It's the international version of a 10-year-old holding their breath until the parents give in. Trouble is, Dad is onto your trick. I know. All the headlines about Trump caved and the U.S. will back down, etc., etc. Guess again. This is just the beginning of the noise in the political space that occurs as nation-states tussle. Just checkers being moved around the board. You can pretend we're playing chess if you prefer, but the idea is the same. The game has only just started, and the lamestream media is totally clueless as to what's happening on the board. It doesn't help that Trump likes it when everyone else is confused. All we know for sure is that the game just started. Oh, and Trump really doesn't like to lose. Which means no, the U.S. won't back down. Trump will maneuver, but he won't cave in. We're playing a new game now, whether or not the rest of the world likes it. The U.S. is no longer going to allow herself to be taken advantage of, because the days when that was to the U.S.'s advantage are long over. It will problem. Whatever game we end up playing, the board will be fair, or the U.S. will toss it against the wall. Again. It'll probably take a decade or more for Europe to understand the memo. Sadly, Europe will delude itself for a good while longer that the US is still going to act in everyone else's best interest instead of her own. And European leaders will keep right on telling themselves how much smarter they are than all those provincial Americans. So once the tantrum fails, manipulation will ensue. What won't happen is real, decisive, and significant economic and defensive realignments. Those are bitter pills to swallow, and Europe will refuse to believe that they have to take their medicine until they run out of other options in about a decade or so. The opening moves are nearly over. I expect Europe will be fairly quickly moved to resolve the trade conflict. It'll take longer than it should, but they will reduce both tariffs and barriers to U.S. goods. The U.S. will return the favor, then sell them a few hundred F-35s. So yeah, Europe will make some improvements in their defense industries and how those contracts are financed. That will go a long way to improving things. But it won't make Europe independent of the U.S. in either trade or defense. Europe cannot replace several key systems with their own at present. They need a major investment in R&D to even get started. It's cheaper and less scary to just buy Patriot batteries and F-35s. Even then, those purchases will fall far short of Europe's actual needs. But in a choice between the socialistic welfare state or actually being able to defend themselves, 8 weeks of vacation time are going to win out over not becoming Russian puppets 9 times out of 10. Europe has a long way to go into becoming a grown-up international alliance. The international alliance it thinks it is. Step 1 is being taken right now, whether Europe likes it or not. You know, we might could throw in a backbone to go with those F-35s if you're interested. Europe?